au/Melbourne.
Toute la communauté internationale doit se mobiliser pour y remédier.
This is a most important question for all of us.
Our way of life, our people, our economy, our environment and our society.
The world according to Michael. That Michael is Michael Danby. He is the Labor member for the seat of Melbourne Ports. He's also the former chair of the Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee in the Federal Parliament. Greg Sheridan couldn't make it today, so we thought Michael Danby would fill his shoes admirably. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Raf.
Look, let's leap straight to what's going to make news. How long have we been at war in Afghanistan? Since 2001. The President, Donald Trump's going to make a statement on what they are going to do next. Do we know what to expect?
I think the American Joint Chiefs want 50% increase. It's not a surge, but it's from, I think, from 8 to 12. And that's against what Trump said when he was about to be elected. But, that's not sort of a criteria for sort of saying something won't happen. I think they want... Mattis, particularly Defence Secretary, wants the ability of the American Special Forces to intervene, which is not in their mandate at the moment. So it's a change of doctrine, which is the most important thing that's happening, not just the increase in numbers.
So why would that help? I mean, I think, and this is something Australia was heavily involved in, was just the ability to run around and do stuff, basically, your commandos, whoever.
Yeah,
do you think it'll make a difference?
They're like the Special Forces Fire Brigade when the Taliban is about to run over a town and the Afghans can't hold them out, the Afghan government troops can't hold them out, then the US and perhaps other Special Forces and air power will be used. So I think after the trillions of dollars of investment by all of us in the West, the American military, I don't know about Trump in particular, don't want to sort of lose that investment or have wasted all of those lives or all of that expenditure. I suppose that's the bottom line.
They still have that essential problem, though, don't they? It's, we've had a crack military there for a while in varying numbers. It's not a military problem, though, is it? It's a political problem.
You're absolutely right. Weaning all of this is... It seems that, however odious that is, you have to make a deal with the Taliban. Maybe leave them in control of certain provinces as long as the Afghans have got the capital and the major cities, the current Afghan government, which was, after all, democratically elected, and I suppose the Americans in Australia don't want to throw them to the wolves.
Do you think that would happen? Do you think there would be like an implicit agreement that, okay, the Taliban can have those bits of the country? Is that...
Yeah, they nearly got to that at some point previously. But I wouldn't like the Taliban to overrun Kabul too. The last time we had Islamic fundamentalists overrun Kabul, the then communist government of Najibullah was... what they did to him personally, he was run through the streets and castrated publicly and then murdered. It would be very ugly.
Do you think it's going to change Australia as well? I think we've still got, I think there's a couple of dozen people there at the moment. It's not going to change much for Australia,
I don't think it will. I think we're embedded in all levels of the American military forces, and I think we've stepped up, with small forces before we were asked, both in the Middle East and in Afghanistan. And I think that gives you the cred to not have to do any more when the Americans do a sort of 50% increase. Thereafter, it's not a huge amount, 12,000 in the global establishment of American military.
Let's talk about a very political aspect of America's military. The President, Donald J. Trump, is in a fair bit of, I think it's fair to say, hot water over his comments about Charlottesville. The military responded. They came out.
Raf, that's one of the most unusual things I've ever seen, to have the Joint Chiefs repudiate the President. They didn't attack him personally, but what they said was that the role of all people from all backgrounds in our military is something that we strongly support and identify with and will defend. It's, of course, very important because Spanish Americans, Puerto Ricans and African Americans constitute a very large proportion of the Marines, the Navy, etc. So they're speaking for their people, and but it's still very unusual. Just an example of how fractured things are in the United States, that military people feel a necessity to tweet can you imagine? I mean, like, what is that?
It's weird, isn't it?
It's weird.
Yeah. But it's a different presidency. I'm trying to keep my language as value neutral as I can. When he proposed the transgender ban, President Trump, again, the military chiefs said publicly and tweeted out, listen, no change for now.
I didn't know there were 12,000 transgender people in the US military.
Well, it's big, isn't it? It's big.
Bigger than one might have imagined. But so they defend their people, and I think that's very interesting. And the most interesting thing is nothing, as I understand it, has been done about his
about the transgender ban. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to North Korea. This is especially concerning. 6 minutes to 10. Michael Danby is with us. Normally, he's a parliamentarian. He's the ALP member for the seat of Melbourne Ports. He used to chair the Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee, and we thought we'd bring him in, shake things up a little as we look around the world. So North Korea specifically mentioned Australia and said that whatever our Prime Minister was proposing was a suicidal act. What does that mean?
It means that the North Koreans have noticed that we're a very small part of the current annual US-South Korean military exercises. I would have preferred if they hadn't noticed us, but the general evaluation is that Kim Jong-un's threats to use his long-range ballistic missiles, the Hwasong-14 is the particular one that affects Australia and the west coast of the United States, because it allegedly has a range of 10,000 kilometres with their new miniaturised nuclear nose cone. I mean, that's the 5% circumstance under which we should be concerned about his exaggerated rhetoric. I think keep ignoring his rhetoric, keep working on the Chinese to screw down those economic sanctions that they agreed to at the United Nations. That's the way to go. And I think Trump, to his credit, didn't say something provocative in his last tweet about North Korea. He sort of tried to calm things down a bit.
How realistic is a military clash? One of the really interesting things that happened last week, Steve Bannon, who was the fourth to go in 4 weeks of President Trump's advisors, he actually said in an interview there are no military options in North Korea. I think he said along the lines of it's a pipe dream. Is he right?
If the North Koreans were to bracket, that is to drop 4 or 2 ballistic missiles on either side of Guam, which is what Kim Jong-un was threatening, the American response might be to bomb the ballistic missile bases to the extent they know where they are, because they're all on mobile launchers these days, and the North Koreans specialise in building these things deep into mountains. I'm not talking about hills, I'm talking about mountains. That's why the US had to invent a special category of munitions called bunker busters, but I'm not even sure that they will work. The response, unfortunately, would be on the citizens of Seoul. Seoul is 40 kilometres from the North Korean border, and the North Koreans have a conventional military second strike option. That is 40,000 artillery tubes. Even if most of them were destroyed,
40,000 artillery pieces.
40,000 artillery tubes. I mean, that includes mortars and lower grade caliber weapons too. But this is all a threat to the people of Seoul. Seoul is a vital, beautiful, democratic capital of South Korea, and they estimate that if there was a full-out attack by the North Koreans using that conventional second strike option, that hundreds of thousands of people would die.
So then their technological advancement in North Korea, you're talking about the miniaturization of nuclear weapons, that just entrenches that regime, doesn't it? I mean, what you're saying sounds very much like there is no military option. Steve Bannon's right. If they've got an even better or even greater likelihood
something can be true even
weapon.
if Steve Bannon says it's true. I suppose you have to work on that principle.
Yes.
But the whole idea of that nuclear weapon is to entrench the regime.
Yes.
He has seen all other similar dictatorial regimes fall, and only the ones with nuclear weapons, the Iranians have taken this message too, survive the inevitable democratic rollover or regime change that these particular authoritarian regimes fear.
Just a few of your texts. Has a woman ever featured on The World According to? I've no idea. I'm just here while John Payne's away. Afghanistan will always be a deadly mess unless Pakistan is cleaned up. Now, I think there's probably a lot in that. Say that again. We have to make an agreement with the Taliban. Say that again. Agreement with the Taliban. Yep. Look, Michael was floating that idea, Mally. It's been floated many, many times. And Linda texting to say that Trump will ramp up the wars. That's usually what happens with civil unrest. Think what was happening in the US at the time of the Vietnam War. That's from Linda. Do you think that's fair,
Raf, I
Michael?
wasn't so enthusiastic about making a deal with the Taliban. I'm just saying that sort of local, unstated arrangements are probably, what you might have to do.
Yeah, and do you think because of America's division and bitter partisanship, is some sort of military conflict made more
what we're
likely by
not
that?
noticing in all of this is what the Chinese are doing. And I wanted to say, as sort of my parting comment to you, that the ABC's and the Fairfax's role in exposing sort of increasing Chinese aggression with the donations thing that Four Corners had is one of the most important developments in Australian foreign policy, because that's what we're really not noticing. You had in Fairfax that really good report on the weekend about the Solomon Islands being bribed by the Beijing telco for $6.5 million to put the submarine cable into the Australian NBN. Now, that's just typical of what's happening. The South China Sea, 60% of Australian trade, and the donations. So it's all a picture.
Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Michael Danby, the ALP MP for the seat of Melbourne Port. It's coming up. Free legal advice with David Whiting. You can call, the number, 1300 222 774. David Whiting taking your calls very soon.